2 years ago, we did a cursory analysis to see how many reports and documents have been written about the Sahel and how they projected the Sahel. We realized that there were 348 publications on the Sahel, and of the 348 publications, only 2 pointed to the Sahel as a place where anybody could invest. So as UNDP, we reached out to the Special Coordinator for Development. President Goodluck Jonathan's graciously accepted to accompany us on this journey to ask a single question. Why is the Sahel seen as a fractured region?
The Sahel region, stretching across West and Central Africa, boasts of a rich tapestry of cultures and natural resources. Although it faces significant challenges such as terrorism, food insecurity, poverty and weak institutions, there is the potential for positive change. By fostering collaboration and building stronger institutions, the region can harness its resources and cultivate stability and prosperity for its communities. On July 30 to 31, 2025, the government of the Gambia, along with the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, International IDEA, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, hosted the inaugural Sahel Governance Forum under the theme, The Future of Governance, Rebuilding Public Trust and Social Cohesion in the Sahel. The 2-day forum brought together over 300 stakeholders from across the Sahel, including current and former heads of state, AU and ECOWAS representatives, UN officials, diplomats, civil society leaders, and development partners. His Excellency, President of the Republic of the Gambia, Adama Barrow, opened the event with a call to action, encouraging participants to transform discussions into tangible change.
A well-coordinated, collaborative approach to implement shared commitments and resolutions is a viable option to ensure justice, inclusive and sustainable solutions for today's realities, especially for positively impacting the dynamic and creative youth and women of the region and the continent at large. We must always remember that peace in the Sahel can influence peace and stability in Africa and beyond. Hence the urgency to continue dialoguing and working together to transform our challenges into meaningful outcomes.
Delivering his address, former Nigerian President Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, a leading voice for peace and democracy across Africa, called for collaborative efforts to address the governance challenges in the Sahel. He emphasized that inclusive leadership focused on people's welfare is essential and that fostering wealth creation is key to effectively manage the region and earn the trust of its citizens.
If we must get the Sahel managed, the key thing is that we must find ways to create wealth in the Sahel. We must find ways to create wealth in the Sahel. And that is why when I was the president, I just have to summarize because there is no time. I did 2 things. We started rehabilitating all our irrigation projects in northern Nigeria. The current president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, was my Minister of Agri. You can ask him. We started rehabilitating. We said we must rehabilitate all the irrigation projects in the Sahelian region and even start fresh new ones, because farmers must cultivate at least 3 times in a year if you must create wealth in these areas. When people are poor, they can do anything. The young people can do anything to survive. And that is one of the greatest problems we have in Somalia, we have in the Sahelian zone. The second thing I see that we must also rehabilitate, and that one UNDP is here, we must revisit the Great Green Wall Project. The Great Green Wall Project was initiated by the World Bank. And of course, AU launched it, I think, in Lagos in 2007. But after that, it collapsed. And I said, well, let us start in Nigeria. And if it is working, we can push other countries where we're supposed to plant trees from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean across these areas to make sure that the desert no longer pushed down. We must make farmers in the Sahelian zone to crop at least 3 times a year, or at worst 2 times, if we must create wealth, if we must manage security. And I believe these are possible if the countries are willing to do that.
In his remarks, Dr. Umar Aliu Toure, President of the ECOWAS Commission, emphasized that effective governance goes beyond voting. He warned that without the principles of accountability, discipline, and results, Africa will continue to possess abundant resources while its people suffer in poverty.
Governance excellencies is about accountability. It is about discipline. It is about results. Therefore, unless accountability governs citizens and government relationships, unless discipline permeates our social fabrics, and unless results drive our public engagement, in other words, unless we fix governance, Africa will continue to sit on gold mines and gas and oil wells, but African people will continue to wallow in poverty.
Reflecting on the theme of the event, Ahunna Isiakonwa, UN Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director for Africa, stressed the need to tackle governance issues in the Sahel to achieve stability. She noted that the people desire dependable institutions and dedicated leaders who stay engaged beyond election cycles rather than miraculous solutions.
I ask myself the question, what time is it? As we observe the bleeding of nations, the division in our world, the walking away from solidarity and what makes for our common humanity, that philosophy of Ubuntu. As nations look inwards and retreat from multilateralism, a system that is designed to save us from ourselves, I ask myself, what time is it? And I think this is Africa's time. This is Africa's moment. This is Africa's century. This is time for Africa to show the world that although it is shaped like a question mark, it has the answer to a broken world.
The event also witnessed many panel discussions. In one of the panels that focused on governance for posterity, Governor of Bauchi State, Senator Bala Mohammed, emphasized Nigeria's commitment to regional dialogue and democratic renewal. He called for transparent economic governance at the subnational levels, fair management of the Sahel's natural resources, youth empowerment programs, and stronger anti-corruption measures to promote regional cooperation and sustainable development.
We came in when we had only 300 million naira as IGR in my state, with a population of 8 million, because there had been a lot of leakages, a lot of sharp practices in the management of IGR. So we had to really prepare our youth in agriculture, because you cannot mop up all those people that are in. So we had an agri policy that really created ways and means for the young people to be put back to the farms, giving startups so that at the end of the day they become demonstration farms. We really created a lot of prosperity along that line, where young people, graduates, or those with diplomas will be able to employ their kins and kin. At the end of the day, they will make 20, 30 million naira. And that is a lot, from poverty to prosperity. And in solid minerals, we came up with a policy whereby we don't allow our community leaders, our traditional rulers, to sign community agreements for the foreigners, mostly the Chinese, to come and cut away our common resources. We become part and parcel as a state government with the process of the business. We built over 7,000 classrooms to remove the prevalence of out-of-school children in my state through collaboration with international bodies. The UNDP has been there to build our system, UNICEF and the rest, and we show fidelity, sincerity in terms of governance in such a manner that we are trusted. Trust is the key word. So the whole issue of governance is looking at the planning stage, the understanding of your problems and challenges at the Sahel. The Sahel has so much potentials.
The forum concluded with a commitment to create an action plan that includes a regional governance roadmap to guide governance reforms and strengthen partnerships among governments, ECOWAS, the AU, UN agencies, and civil society for inclusive implementation. From BombshelL, the journey begins. A journey towards institutions that serve, borders that connect, and leadership that delivers for all.
We will all agree that the speakers collectively emphasize that while geopolitical tensions and institutional backsliding pose real threats, the Sahel's transformation lies in its resilience. It lies in the resilience of its people and the political will to embrace citizen-driven reform, youth inclusion, and visionary leadership. President Jonathan also challenged us to move beyond the rhetorics to practical wealth-creating solutions for the Sahel. Madam Ahuna declared that the crisis in the Sahel is not just about fragility. That's the conversation when you talk about the Sahel. Everybody says, oh, it is fractured, it is fragile, it is volatile. But she said that it is a failure to invest in governance as a force for justice and prosperity. Again, the word justice. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to dive straight to the first panel of today. And this will be a conversation with the former President of the Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and will be moderated by the Assistant Secretary General of UNDP, Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa, Madam Ahuna Eziokonwa.
What do you think those days, those early days of being without, how do you think that shaped then the quality of leadership that you delivered? Did it make you more compassionate? Was there a link? Just sort of walk us through a little bit how living under those conditions, that being your formative years, your beginnings, quite poor, and then rising to that level when you then land at your desk on day one as President of Nigeria, did your upbringing have shape how you delivered as president?
Definitely it does. Because when you pass through my kind of life history, trajectory, from nothing to the top, that's supposed to humble you. So if you see the next child or the next person, and if that person is still low, you should know that if you were able to get up from that level to the peak, that child too can get to the peak. That really helps you in terms of your relationship with people. A number of people say, President, you're a very humble person. I must be humbled because I was not born with a silver spoon in the mouth. I grew from the gutter, kind of, in a rural setting. So it was by divine providence that Nigerians voted for me, I become their president. So that humbles you. And that makes you to have that patience to listen to people.
So, Mr. President, we in UNDP, we support elections, right? We are there all the time to support elections to be fair, free, and stable. And I have to say, as a UN official who's been in these countries when elections are being held, the biggest issue is not elections, it's accepting the result of the elections. And there we sort of brace ourselves for conflict, for violence, because culturally, in a lot of these elections, it seems acceptance is a real issue. And then, as a result, we have a lot of instability. Electoral violence on the continent is quite pervasive. You stood out when you conceded an election even before the results. And I think the world was watching because we know that Nigeria is very vulnerable to violence because it's a multi-ethnic society as well, and sometimes elections can go that route. So any little spark could sort of lead to huge violence. But you stood out and you conceded. Can you sort of narrate to us a little bit what that moment was like?
Thank you. Just like you mentioned, as a leader, especially as the president of a country, taking decisions are very complicated issues because the decisions you take don't affect only you, but affect so many people. And a complex country like Nigeria, where ethnicity is always there, religion is always there. And when you are taking certain decisions, especially politically related, it affects the people that work with you. It affects your ethnic group. It affects people who have the same faith with you. So there are so many things. But even at that, a president must take very hard decisions as long as you are convinced that that is in the best interest of the people, even if that decision will cost you personally. When you mentioned the issue of the elections, I think I gave you a copy of my book in Ghana. If you read a section of it, I mentioned what was going through my mind those last hours leading to the elections, and for me to concede defeat and call late General Buhari to congratulate him even before the election was formally announced. One thing can guide anybody to take such decisions. First and foremost is the motive that takes you to politics. Why did you get into politics? On the average, I can say probably more people get into politics because they want to make money. If that is your driving motive for going to the politics, then you wouldn't want to leave the office. You prefer to die there in the office. But if that is not the reason, you want to serve the people, and you notice that things have changed, and if you don't take certain decisions, it will affect the very people that you want to serve. In Nigeria then, I knew as a president that the country was very tense, and it could have led to killings and destruction of private properties. And when I look at the whole scenario, I felt that no, it's not about being the president of Nigeria. In line with my slogan during the campaigns, that my political ambition to be the president of Nigeria is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. So I had to take that decision to make sure that we protect people's assets. Because we worked hard for that 5 years I was the president of Nigeria. We encouraged local and foreign investments in the country. And I cannot sit down and watch people vandalizing and destroying people's investment in the name of political conflicts, like we see what is happening in South Sudan, what is happening in Sudan and other countries. These countries have been degraded because of leadership struggle. And I feel Nigeria should not pass through that trajectory as a nation. So it was easy for me to take that decision. It was not too pleasing to everybody. And of course, people who worked with me suffered because of that decision.
But still, I'm happy today that I took that decision to save the life of people, to protect the investment of Nigerians. And I think Nigerians even appreciate me more now than when I was in office. So what is the issue of being a president for? Anybody can be a president. But when you become a president, what did you leave behind? What will people remember you for? That is fundamental. Thank you.
So, you talked about motive and you talked about, people sometimes going to for making money. But actually, a lot of those who end up in these positions have already, maybe yours is an exception, but most of our leaders come from money. And so you wonder, what is the other motive? What else? I mean, we also know about power, right? And I've often wondered how leaders in Africa in particular, where there is a bit of a worship culture, you find that once you get to a certain position, people around you literally worship you. And they create this sense of a God. Leaders are actually made by the people. And unfortunately, in the context of Africa, we revere this position, perhaps to the extreme. How does that make you feel when you stand up? A million people around you stand up. They're literally like, "Hey, Oga, Igwe." You're sort of revered, and does that? How do you resist playing God? How does that make you feel? How do you retain some form of humility despite this worship?
Thank you so much. In your introductory remarks, you mentioned that a number of people who became leaders in our countries, presidents, prime ministers, came from money, which is true. But don't forget that elementary economics said that human wants are insatiable. No, the human wants, nobody earns money and thinks it's enough. So they will expect to get more. You think that they are so rich, they are stupendously rich, but to them, they want more. And to me, one key thing about what I notice is there's a slight difference between corruption to make money and greed. The greatest problem we have in most of our countries is greed by leaders. Not necessarily heads of state alone, even those who have the opportunity to head departments of government. It's greed that can make somebody steal money that you will not spend. That is beyond corruption. If you read this book written by one British journalist, Richard Dowden, published in 2008, read the section on Nigeria. It talks about corruption in Nigeria. So the people who have the privilege of being heads of state, if they are not greedy, they use the resources better. They make sure the resources go around through projects and other in the nations better. But when they are greedy, one person alone will want to take 50% of the resources or the income of the country and go and hide it in a bank abroad that he will not even spend the money. See, so these are the fundamental issues. So, yes, he talks about heads of state or leaders now becoming like little gods, deities. Some people like to be worshipped, and maybe that is one of the things that makes me completely different. I hate it. I don't like it at all. In fact, those who have worked with me when I was in office, from the state to the center, and even those who are still working with me, they will know my ways of life. My executive director is here, and my medium aide is also here. I hate a situation where
this hero worship, where people begin to worship leaders as if you are not a human being again. And that one gets into the mind of leaders, and they begin to play the role of God on earth.
At the time you took office, Nigeria was declared the largest economy in Africa. That means something. But at the same time, multidimensional poverty in Nigeria was greater than anywhere else in Africa. And then, so you're looking at this situation, how did you rein in on those habits and tendencies that robbed millions of Nigerians, hard-working people, by the way, of the opportunity to prosper? What was your biggest challenge in trying to address the issue?
At first and foremost, there are two levels of poverty. The multidimensional poverty, that will say that people are extremely poor. These are most cases peasants, people who have no skills, probably not even educated. And for you to make sure that people get out of that level, you must look at what dominates the local economies in the various areas and encourage it. In Nigeria, we're an agrarian society. And that is why we did very well in agriculture. If you interview Akin, the president, ADB president, he will tell you what we did. It was because of what we did in agriculture that made him to even be appointed or elected as the president of the African Development Bank. So that is to make sure that that was form of poverty at that level. Then, of course, the other levels, look, we cannot continue. Nigeria, we are known for crude oil. We export crude oil, then we import petroleum products. This is not ironical. We export the crude oil. Then we go to other countries to import aviation fuel, we import PMS for our cars, we import kerosene. So we started encouraging that, look, we must have refineries. The government refineries were all broken down. We tried to reactivate them, but it was always a problem. So the only thing is to encourage the private sector. And we started the journey. Now, Dangote, in fact, Nigeria is no longer importing petroleum products. We started that journey. And we didn't do much in the solid mineral sector. Maybe because there were too many, we changed the ministers too frequently. But that was my directive to any of the ministers that I appointed. We cannot continue to export raw material. Go to Nigeria, go to states like Zamfara State, where the poverty level is quite high. So you can see the level at which people operate. But you have gold. And people from modern nationalities, from what you see, are just using the locals to steal and send it out of the country. So until we are able to exploit our own resources, add value to our own resources, and export finished produce, we cannot just claim we are rich, we are rich, we are rich. We are poor. That is clear. Then when you talked, maybe you talked about the issues of corruption in Africa. Yes, though sometimes some of these corruption issues that we read in the papers are somehow blown out of proportion. Let me give you an example. To me, when I came into office, 2011, I signed the Freedom of Information Bill into law, passed a law to give journalists and people in civil society free access to get any information you want to get from any department of government. Somebody who wants to be stealing money will not do that. So that if you hear anything, whistleblow anything, you are free to go. And if the government official failed to give you that information, it's a criminal offense. We did that. When we were to celebrate, 2010, when we were to celebrate 50 years of our independence, 50 years of Nigerian independence, there's something I did with my cabinet. Probably if my governor here, maybe if he attended the council meeting that day, he will remember. I bought this book written by Richard Dawson called Africa, Altered States, Ordinary Miracles, and talks about all kinds of things across. It's a British journalist that has been covering Africa since 1975. When he talks about Nigeria, life in Lagos, corruption in Nigeria, and so on. I bought that book and distributed to council members. And I also bought this Singaporean man's book, From Third to First, Aliko and you also. Yes, I said they should read. Then I asked them to read the section on Nigeria, especially from Richard's book. So I told them that this program, we'll have a conference like this, but we are going to invite that man to be the keynote speaker. And my own minister said, President, no. That this man that finished us, no, you cannot bring him. I said, the man did not finish us. We must invite him, let him come and speak. Let us know the perception of people about us. Some may be ordinary perception, some may be real. Let us not deceive us. Well, as executive president, I forced on my ministers. We invited that man.
You made an executive order.
No. Then I also invited one lady, a white lady from South African journalist that wrote a book based in Korean politics. This is our turn to chop. You know this lady, BombshelL, Yes, Michelle Wrong. As one of the panelists, Kenya and Nigeria have some similar attributes in terms of certain things. And my ministers were looking at me. I said, they must come. We must interact with them. And we had the conference. Dodin said that when he got the invitation, he said, he was surprised that probably the president is inviting him so that the president will hurt him because of what he wrote about Nigeria. But that is my mind. So it was totally committed to, you can't eradicate corruption completely, but should be able to reduce it to the level that will not affect society again. At least one country that has done well recently is Rwanda. Kagame is doing quite well in terms of that. I did not succeed to that level. I know during my government there was this scandal, which was more political than, and those who read it. For example, the CBN governor, the head of my treasury, raised an alarm that we lost $49.8 billion between January 2012 and July 2013. That's the period of 1 year, 7 months. When you call $59.8 billion, just call it $50 billion. And it was surprising. And I don't think from the income, the oil incomes, I don't think when the IOCs, the operators remove their own and so on, what the government and cannot be up to that within that space of time. It's a lot of money. Later on, when there was so much talks about it, it changed it to 12 billion. Later, it changed it to 20 billion. So even the figures, though everybody talks about for the 49.8, but the 12 billion later mentioned and 20 billion later mentioned. The Senate has to investigate and using consultants. One of the senators is here, Senator Negi, and they did not see the money. The government has to use PWD, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to audit. And PricewaterhouseCoopers said that NNPC cannot properly give proper account to about $1.48 billion. They queried that they did not say it was stolen, but in terms of documentation and so on, they couldn't give proper account. But the story is that under Jonathan, the country lost $50 billion. I remember that year when we have a conference between Africa and Europe, EU. So when we went to Brussels, of course, Angela Merkel, then the Chancellor of Germany, asked me for a bilateral. So she invited me. So I have to go there with some of my ministers. Immediately we got in. She did not even allow me to sit down. Said President Jonathan, that Nigeria lost $49.8 billion. I just looked at her and said, well, Your Excellency, you know, Germany, your economy is quite strong. So 49.8, just call 50 billion. So your economy is strong. So if you lose $50 billion, you'll not notice it. But in Nigeria, if we lose $50 billion, the federal government, the state governments will not be able to pay salaries. Yes. So just turn and look at me and say, well, even in Germany, $50 billion is a lot of money. And ended there. So people will just hear some of these figures. But when you go into it, it is not quite correct. So yes, there is corruption in Africa, there is corruption in Nigeria, no doubt about that.
Yes.
But some of the stories are not absolutely correct.
Yeah. We know that you have established the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, and you are also part of this mediation force under the elders. Could you share maybe some behind-the-scenes story where your identity as a former president made a difference in a tense mediation situation, and what qualities do African leaders need most to be effective peace builders today? We're looking for jobs for former presidents so that they can actually leave. So if you can sort of give us some insights on life after the presidency, and what you would advise those who are in power and contemplating maybe also conceding, what qualities they would need or what opportunities are there for them to continue to make their legacy.
Thank you. You raised a number of things. I hope I'll be able to cover all of them. Any one that I don't, probably some other person can ask. But the key thing is the word trust. Even relating to the activities of a former president, relating to leaders and the citizens of their country. Trust is not something that you can impose or even use the holy books to deceive people. People look at you and look at your family, and you cannot, maybe you have children that are just in their 20s and they are driving the best cars. They've been hitting people, killing people, spraying money in pub clubs and so on, living a very kind of lavish life. And you were a government functionary, be it a president, be it a governor, be it a minister or thereabouts. And you expect people to trust you. Nobody will trust you. So your lifestyle will attract that trust. If people don't believe in you, they will not trust you. And it affects the relationship between leaders. And you could talk from morning till night. For example, probably when you are in office, all the pebbles, you take it to the right. You have left office as a president, you've gone to another president and say, please, these pebbles, don't take everything to the right, spread it. The man will look at you and go, look at this hypocrite. So, in fact, because of the way a leader lives his life and the circumstances around you, can make it easier for you to solve problems. Look at this, the last election in the Gambia here. We came under the platform of the West African Elders Forum. When the results were announced, the country was tense. That night, it was about between 11 and 12 or so. We get the signals that the youths from the opposition have gathered in the house of the opposition leader. And they want to mobilize that night to create havoc in the city of Banjul. So what do? And the security were everywhere. So if these youths move out in that night, they will clash with the security with weapons. Definitely there will be few deaths. We have to move to the person's house. And when we got there, we saw the sea of young, angry people outside the house. But immediately we were walking in that night, and they were talking to themselves, who is that? So President Jonathan. The hearing that was President Jonathan alone calmed the atmosphere, about 50%. That at least we've gone to listen to them, and this is a man that would surely say the truth to government or whatever. course, we passed through, we had a conversation with the leader until we were able to convince them to disperse the youth. So sometimes the personal reaction, when we went to the Botswana election, Botswana, the ruling party that just lost the election, was there for 58 years. From independence, only one party that was able to rule. And before the election, the president has left. I said, Jonathan, well, you were the president of Nigeria and you left. So if I lost the election, I will leave. So that's what he said. That means that he remembered what I did in Nigeria. So in one way or the other, sometimes people don't say it out. But sometimes just seeing you and remembering what you stand for brings some kind of calmness in them. So definitely, the issue of trust is critical for leaders and even for the interaction with people generally.
Excellencies, thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Senator Abdul Ningi, and I'm a senator in the Nigerian Parliament. Mr. President, let me most profoundly say I'm so proud of you. Your opening speech has actually made our days here. Mr. President recalled when you were in power, I was in the Senate, and of course, the deputy Senate leader. We had majority both in the House of Reps and in the Senate and in the subnationals. That means we had more governors, almost 22 to 21 governors, and almost 473 local governments out of 774 from Nigeria. My question has to do with this scenario of most leaders, particularly in Nigeria, having what you call in the Nigerian parlance cabal. This cabal are defined as the inner caucus of most head of states or president in Nigeria. And there was this rumor that if the cabal had known you are going to concede to the president, we had this rumor that you would have been drugged so that you will be sleeping for 24 hours. And therefore, there is no way you concede. Secondly, we heard that there was this rumor that they make it almost impossible for you to come out and address the Nigerian nation while conceding. Mr. President, my question is, did you foresee at that material time that there are some interest groups within the presidency and outside the presidency that had that ambition, and therefore you did a fast one on them and quickly concede even before the formal announcement of the official result?
In terms of the issue of cabal, I don't know, Nigeria, that word cabal has now come to stay in our political vocabulary. But there is nobody who will hold a very high office, even in the private sector, that don't have some key people around him. No matter how knowledgeable you are, you need people to sometimes give you certain suggestions, sometimes look at something differently. So there's absolutely nothing wrong in a president having some key leaders that he can, because not everybody will easily have access to the president. In one way or the other, he may have some friends, some old colleagues, and so on. The problem we have is that, and that's why we use this name cabal and we put some kind of negative connotation to it, because the advice and their suggestions is to their own benefit. If they are advising a president or a prime minister on general things that will bring benefit to the public, nobody will frown about it. Why should the president have a cabinet of ministers? They are all cabal, because they meet in the executive council to conspire about how they will run the country. But it's just a larger cabal. So, yes, so presidents have that. I don't really have a cabal by definition. But yes, some elders, some people senior to me who have been in government before me, who have seen it all, from time to time see me to make suggestions. And that is normal for everybody. I remember there was a time I was talking with the first military governor of the old River State, King Spiv, who was a governor at the age of 24, as a military officer. I said that sometimes when he called some of his commissioners and direct them to do certain things, they will turn at him and say, my son will not do it this way. Yes. So you have those kind of who are senior to you that sometimes can help. So there is nothing wrong. And there is no cabal that confused me. That day, I remember vividly that I called General Buhari. Results were coming in. Then I witnessed the incident that happened at the National Election Center when Elder Rubebe, who was representing me, challenged Jiga, the chairman of the National Independent Electoral Commission. And it was very bad, and people say the country would go into crisis. We witnessed all that. So, yeah, some of my aides, some ministers were there with me, some of my aides were there. And people were talking random. I couldn't even talk. I was just listening to people. Everybody is making one suggestion or the other, and so on. I remember Ngozi too was there, the finance minister then. Attorney General, I think, was also there. Dudafa was there. This theater minister then, Shidoka. Shidoka was also there and so on. I listened to everybody who was talking. So at a point, I left them and entered to my study down. And I called the control to link me up with President Buhari then. I didn't even tell them. So they linked me up. Then I congratulated Buhari. So after that, I came back to join them. And they were still talking. And I said, well, gentlemen, no need to talk again. I've congratulated Buhari. It's over. Then Chidoka, I said, President, have you done that? I said, yes. They said, can I tweet it? I said, go on and tweet it. So it was Chidoka that tweeted, and they went viral. So the stories of Kabad pushing left and right, I don't think it was quite correct. There was nothing like that. Then you ask whether there are certain things I would have loved to do, but I couldn't do. Yes, I was there for 5 years. So definitely you cannot exhaust what you would have loved to do for your country. But I don't need to lament over such issues. The people who have taken over will continue to run the country the way they see. Nigeria will continue to look at them and make their own suggestions. I don't want to begin to lament over what I would have done differently or whatever. So thank you for that.
C'est un plaisir de vous voir aujourd'hui dans cette salle et désolé de parler en français. Je vais aller droit au but. C'est une question. Aujourd'hui, nous avons une jeunesse africaine très engagée, très ambitieuse, mais qui cherche la voie. Vous, en tant que président, avec ce parcours aussi inspirant, qu'est-ce que vous nous conseillez? Quelle est la voie à emprunter pour avoir un parcours aussi inspirant que le vôtre? Pas seulement en devenant président, parce qu'il faut se le dire, on ne peut pas tous devenir président, mais vous avez impacté avant votre présidence, pendant votre présidence, et aujourd'hui vous continuez d'impacter à travers votre fondation. Qu'est-ce que nous devrons faire en tant que jeunes pour avoir ce parcours comme vous l'avez eu? Merci.
If you had a last word for how you think leaders, whether at the continental, national, or global level, should behave, one word for each of those layers, for us to succeed as a people and as a world, what would those final words be?
Thank you. It's just one word for all the layers, actually. For us in Africa, who are privileged to be leaders, especially at the national level, first and foremost, you must take your citizens as the most precious commodities that you have. And you must take the whole of your country as your garden. And if you take, just like if you have a garden, you wouldn't want to see any rubbish anywhere in the garden. You will want to remove it. So if you take your country as your garden, then you want to do the best. The problem we have in Africa is that political leaders tend to see only a section of the country and some of the citizens as their own. The rest, they have to get, you don't bother. Just like this lady's book that I made reference to, the white South African journalist, Our Turn to Eat. So that is the fundamental problem. So after that is trust. We must live our lives in a way that our citizens will trust us. If, as a president, your lifestyle and the lifestyle of your family members is so glamorous, how would you tell the ordinary person to go and tighten his belt? Then you're an hypocrite. So what we do must communicate to the people better than what we say. I remember when we were trying to, like I was telling you about agriculture. Nigeria, we spent a lot of money importing wheat because our population is big. And you know, in those days, even the change of the cost of bread alone has collapsed empires in those days. And to make sure that the cost of bread comes down and we spend less money in importing wheat, we try to do substitution, add some cassava flour into the wheat to produce our bread. And when we started it and so on, we see that the quality of the bread is quite high. But when you just say, this is cassava bread, people find it difficult to say, I will eat it. And I said, in the State House, it is only that bread that will be served. So if you know your president eats that bread, you will be encouraged to eat it too. You don't need to sermonize. You have to demonstrate. So, for leaders at all levels, our lifestyle is critical.